immuno-oncology and biosimilar company. Prior to joining, Dr. Shei was a MSL at another company that perhaps you can help me pronounce on the critical care team supporting the InnoMax portfolio from 2019 to 2021. He completed his undergraduate, master's, and PhD training at Indiana University, followed by a postdoc at the University of Alabama at Birmingham in the Cystic Fibrosis Research Center. He has authored or co-authored 39 peer-reviewed manuscripts, letters, and book chapters, and has been an editorial board member, editor, and peer reviewer for 26 journals. In his free time, Ren-Jay enjoys spending time with his family, running, cycling, swimming, hiking, camping, cooking, and learning about wine. He's a native Hoosier and currently resides in Indianapolis, Indiana. I will stop sharing and allow you to share your slides. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's great to be here. I'm sorry about the view here. I'm out and about.
No problem.
As you guys will learn, hopefully in the next 15 minutes or so, as I talk about this role, it is actually a very common thing. So I actually emailed you some slides, Rebecca, if that's okay.
Yes.
If you don't mind pulling them up, but just to give a little bit of color about my background while Rebecca's pulling those up. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's great to be here. I wish I could be there in person to talk to you guys live, but I guess, in lieu of that, Zoom, we're all used to these days. But as Rebecca said, as a quick background, I did my undergrad, master's, and PhD at IU. I studied exercise science and biology for my undergrad, and then exercise physiology for my graduate training. And then after that, decided to make a switch into biomedical research, which is what led me down to UAB, where I did my postdoc for just under 3 years and really, really enjoyed it. And, part of what I was doing down there was participating in some translational research where we were taking some of the mechanistic insights that we gained, studying the pathophysiology of the disease, and then trying to apply that to novel therapeutics. And so we did some preclinical work and first in human phase 1 work with a couple biotech companies and pharma companies. And that's really what kind of exposed me to the industry to begin with. And from there, I guess the rest is history. And that's what I hope to share a little bit about over the next few minutes here. So I'll try and take about half the time that I'm allotted to talk through these slides, and then keep the other half open for Q&A. And then we can hopefully have a discussion around any topic that the audience is interested in. So if you don't mind advancing,
yeah.
Rebecca, I think I covered this. I'm sorry, the companies I work for apparently are difficult to pronounce. I didn't even know how to pronounce when I was interviewing, so hopefully that makes me feel better. But the first one was Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals, and then I'm currently at Coherus Biosciences. So if you advance again here real quick. So I'll just kind of try and level set here and tell you guys a little bit about medical affairs and medical science liaisons in general. So I feel like the MSL role is kind of one of the best kept secrets in the industry. I wish I'd known about it sooner so that I could have, maybe pursued this and set myself up for the transition a little earlier, but here I am now. So a medical science liaison is a pretty broad term. We are field-based, or AKA remote, personnel who generally are highly trained, clinical and or scientific experts. And by that, I mean most MSLs will hold a terminal degree, whether that's a PharmD, a PhD, an MD, or some kind of advanced practice degree, like a nurse practitioner or a PA or something like that. And our primary role is to engage in communication with external parties, and those include physicians, researchers, other important stakeholders like population-based decision makers, and so on. Generally, we collectively call these folks key opinion leaders. So you could think of these as, PIs on major grants. You could think of them as, practitioners in the hospital setting, or in the oncology, outpatient setting or whatnot. And generally, these are folks who are in tune with what the current cutting edge looks like in terms of clinical practice, what the latest research is, the latest clinical practice guidelines, updates are, kind of what the latest and greatest is in whatever therapeutic area that they work in. And what we do is kind of engage with these KOLs and really kind of pick their brain about where they see opportunities, what challenges they have, what the current treatment landscape and sometimes competitive environment looks like, and how we can use that information to drive our strategy as a company and really be innovative and be researching and developing new therapeutics in the right space where there's need. And so, I like to think of it as a mix of being a science nerd and also being social. And I think that's why I really like the role. There's other roles within medical affairs as well, outside the MSL role, and I've listed some of them in the first bullet point here. Some of those might include medical information, medcoms, late phase research, where you might be helping managing investigator-initiated research studies, scientific affairs. So there's a lot of different options within medical affairs, and I believe some of the other participants that are going to be talking today, work in some of those roles. So I won't speak to that in too much detail. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So one of the questions I get all the time is, how do MSLs differ from sales reps? Most of the time when I tell people what I do, they think I'm a sales rep, which is fine. I think that's a pretty common thing that we run into as MSLs. But one of the primary differences, if you will, is that the sales reps are really the commercial side of the entity. And so they do the selling, the contracting, the marketing, and they kind of have all the promotional materials. Whereas MSLs in the medical affairs division, we're actually housed in a completely different reporting structure. So we report to the chief medical officer of our company, and our role is strictly defined by engaging in what we call scientific exchange. So talking about evidence-based practice, talking about research studies that are published or have been presented at national meetings, ongoing studies. And so we're really trying to be kind of the science-driven side of things, as opposed to the sales reps who really, their primary role is to be, our commercial side and drive our revenue. And so actually the FDA strictly prohibits us from engaging in any kind of sales or promotional activities. And so we like to call that our division of church and state, if you will. So that's a little bit about how we differ, and there's some resources on those details listed at the reference in the bottom if you're interested in learning more about that. Next slide, please. So the good news is MSL roles are on the rise. I think as most of you who work in biomedical or medical research or clinical research know, that there's a lot of innovation going on in the space. Medicines and management of complex diseases is getting more and more complicated, and there's a rise in off-label use of medicines and things like that. And so there's this need that a lot of healthcare providers tend to want information from peers. And what we as the industry have found is that a lot of times they like receiving that information from fellow terminal degrees holders. And a lot of times, we have PharmDs coming from clinical practice, we have PhDs coming from, bench and translational and clinical research, and we have, MDs as well. A lot of them may be trained internationally or whatnot. And so we're able to help fill that need and provide that information, important product and literature updates to these HCPs. And additionally, I think, in terms of the legal side of things, if you will, we're able to provide that information in a fair, balanced, non-promotional way that, allows the provider to make their own informed decisions. So we don't, recommend anything with their clinical practice. Our role is basically to be the information source and then allow the provider to take that information and interpret and use it as they would like. So I think the good news is that it seems like companies are hiring more MSLs. MSL teams are expanding, and a lot of providers that we've engaged with have really enjoyed having an MSL to rely on as someone that they can call or email when they have questions related to our product. Next slide, please. So why did I choose to become an MSL? I think there's a lot of reasons, and I could spend all day talking about this, but I try to condense it down to a few key things here. Number one, I think the job duties better fit my interest and passion. I think hopefully you can tell from just the last 10 minutes here that I'm a relatively social person. I'm kind of chatty. I like to interact with people, but I also am kind of nerdy. So I really like to be driven by the science and stay up to date with what is going on in the field. And this is a great way to essentially melt those two together and make that actually something that not only that I get to do, but that I actually get paid to do. Um, I also like the opportunity to learn about new therapeutic areas and new disease states. So, I come from a respiratory physiology background and, of course, worked in rare disease, cystic fibrosis. But since moving to the industry, I've worked in critical care, I've worked in oncology, ophthalmology. And so it offers a lot of chance to learn new things and learn new therapeutic areas, which can be both challenging and rewarding at the same time, depending on which day you catch me. I found that I generally have a much better work-life balance. I feel like I have a clean break at the end of the day, if you will. I shut my computer, 5 or 6 o'clock, whatever, and then I don't look at it until the morning, and it's really nice. And the being field-based also offers a lot of flexibility. Generally nobody's clocking you in and clocking you out as long as you complete your tasks and get your work done. The compensation is very competitive. Most of the time, these roles are going to be starting in the mid-six figures. So that's definitely been a consideration, and I think that's kind of an elephant in the room with a lot of PhDs, especially having competitive pay where not only are you able to just meet your bills, but actually meet whatever other financial goals that you have. So I think that's definitely something to consider, and that you shouldn't be afraid to talk about. And I'm happy to discuss that more during the Q&A. As far as geography goes, I think the flexibility is also nice. A lot of times, at least when I was on the academic job search track, you're very limited by when institutions have openings, whether you have grant funding or not, things like that. Whereas, the MSL job, since we help manage a territory, much like a sales rep, we can be based pretty much anywhere within our territory as long as we're close to a major airport so that we can fly to wherever we need to go. So that's been really nice for me, especially being an Indiana native, and my wife is too. We always wanted to live in Indiana, and it just gave us the chance to be a lot more flexible and where we're located geographically. And then the final thing is, I think, one of the really fun things about being an MSL is you can be plugged into a lot of different functions within the company. And what I mean by that is we can help generate real world evidence by providing contact and liaising between our late stage research or health economics outcomes colleagues with providers in the field. We can help with business development activities if we're looking at potentially in licensing or buying new assets or new companies. We can help with other things like clinical research. A lot of times we'll interact with the CRO, a contract research organization, if we're doing a study. And you can also help facilitate research with your KOLs if your KOLs are interested in submitting investigator-initiated research. So this is research proposed by someone, at KUMC. They approach our company with a research idea saying, hey, I have this great idea. I think, it would align with your company's strategy and your product. And so we can be the interface there between, the company and the PI as well. So I think it's really nice to be able to touch. And then, of course, we support our commercial colleagues. We help address medical information requests. We can accompany our sales reps in the field to, speak with HCPs and things like that. We can help review marketing materials, make sure it's scientifically accurate. That typically is a promotional review committee activity that we're responsible for. So again, we get a chance to touch a lot of different functions within the company. And I think that helps you, number one, stay intellectually stimulated by doing different things, but also learning more about how the company operates as a whole, and then meeting people outside your department, which is really nice sometimes. Next slide, please. So far, I think I've told you all these great things about how the MSL role is amazing, and these I think are some of my if I had to put it on paper, some of my favorite parts of the role. I think number one is it's just really fun to talk to smart people. I like to joke that I basically get to go find the best and brightest within my territory or within the field, and my job is really just to get to know them and talk to them and hear about what they have to say. Um, and that's really really fun because they're so passionate, they're so driven, they're so intelligent. They have such a deep well of knowledge about what's going on in the field that it's just fun to just shut my mouth and listen. I think I also really enjoy being able to wear different hats, working on all these different activities, some of which are listed here. Um, it can also be a con sometimes because I think it does make it a little bit more complicated. But I think most of us, who come from a PhD background, are like to be challenged. So I generally most days feel that that's a pro. I already spoke about the IIRs contributing to the overall medical strategy. I think that's a really, fulfilling part of this job is you feel like the insights that you're gathering in your conversations with KOLs actually are help shaping important decisions and driving, our ability to be nimble and responsive to changes in the field. And then of course you get to travel, which that can also be a con depending on how much travel, but I generally enjoy business travel and I've gotten to go to a lot of cool places that I probably wouldn't otherwise have gotten to go. So that's been really fun. So this is all great and all, but of course there's some cons, which on the next slide, please, are listed here. I think everybody hates admin duties. I haven't met a single person who likes them, but we do have to leave a paper trail. We have to log our interactions for business and compliance reasons. We have to submit our expense reports. Since we are field based, almost all of our meetings are always over Zoom. So Zoom fatigue has been real for us since before the pandemic, and it still is. Of course, we also get mistaken for sales reps all the time, so that can be a con sometimes. And going along with that, we do have pretty strict compliance requirements that can be a little bit challenging to learn and a little bit challenging to operate within. But again, because of the nature of our role, we do want to make sure we are providing that fair balanced information and not, speaking promotionally and essentially staying in our lane. I think the other challenging thing, especially for me, was moving from an academic research position to working for a for-profit company. I think it's a really steep learning curve, not only in terms of the day-to-day, the operational things, if you will, how to work this platform or how to work that technology or how to engage with the KOL, but also just the whole mindset. You do have to remember that generally these companies are publicly traded. You do have a board and shareholders and executive leadership and whatnot that you report to, and at the end of the day, the company is driven to innovate and provide new medicines and serve patients, but at the same time, we also have to answer to our shareholders, and finding that balance can be challenging sometimes. And of course, coming along with that, you do wind up having some more interesting folks that you work with, especially on the commercial side, who may not, share your enthusiasm about science. So I think that can also, of course, be challenging as well. And then, like I said on the previous slide, sometimes business travel does get a little tiresome. I generally, I would say 90+% of the time enjoy it, and then 10% of the time it's like, okay, I'm ready to be home. Next slide, please. So some final thoughts. I think there's a lot of opportunities for folks who are coming from academic research or even from clinical practice. Like I said, the PharmD path is very common within the MSL role, both within and outside of academia. I know you guys spent a lot of time yesterday talking about opportunities within academia, but of course, today is focused on things outside. So I think, it's worthwhile if you're not sure or if you just like to learn more. I think it's really worth your time to look into options outside of academia. And congratulations to all of you attending here because you're doing that right now. I also think it's really great to keep your options open. I never intended on pursuing a career in industry, but somehow, I got pretty lucky that a lot of my experiences during my postdoc prepared me very well for the role I'm in now, not only in terms of the research projects I was working on, but also my mentor and how he had a lot of relationships with industry and also some of the other training activities I did for our CTSA. So I think don't be afraid to seek out new experiences. Don't close doors. Don't burn bridges. I think that's important regardless of what career path you pursue. And I think definitely network, network, network. I think no matter what you do, the broader and deeper your network goes, the better it'll serve you in the long run, especially if you're looking to transition. And at the end of the day, do what you love. My wife always makes fun of me because she doesn't think I actually have to work because I'm happy every day and I enjoy what I do. And so I think if you're passionate about it, it doesn't seem like work, and whatever that is for you. So with that, I'd love to open it to questions. And I saw there was at least one that came in over the chat. So if you don't mind reading that to me, since I can't see it on my iPad, I'd be happy to answer some questions.
Yeah, I'd be happy to read that. And if anyone else has questions, please drop them in the chat. Or if you're in the audience, it looks like we'll have a question from the audience as well. So I'll start with the question in the chat. Tyler Weaver asks, how important is your PhD or postdoctoral area of research for landing an MSL position? Or are MSLs hired based more on critical thinking skills that are transferable across multiple domains?
Tyler, that's a great question. I think I'm going to give you a somewhat unsatisfying answer in that both are important. I think what I've been told, and I've been told this by several hiring managers, is a lot of times when you're looking for your first MSL role, most managers don't want to teach you how to be an MSL and also teach you a new therapeutic area. So your best bet is probably sticking to whatever therapeutic area or area of research that you're already an expert in. So for example, for me, it made a lot of sense to stay within respiratory disease. Once you get that first role, it can be a lot easier to move around in your second role to different therapeutic areas. So I think, the key thing, and there's a lot of things that go into it, but I think a couple key things is obviously you have to have the scientific chops. You have to be able to become or already be an expert in whatever that area is. Number two, I think you have to show that you are able to build really good relationships, essentially from scratch, because a lot of times you're meeting these KOLs for the first time, and then it's your job to develop that relationship with them. So you have to be a great communicator, kind of have a lot of that EQ or emotional intelligence, if you will, and be able to navigate that and develop that relationship. And I think number three is, and this is true for any job, but I think your ability to collaborate, because we are located all over the country geographically. We are interacting with a lot of different functions within the organization. So being able to be a really good collaborator, I think, is important as well. So hopefully that helps a little bit. And if you have a follow-up, feel free to add to that.
No, that was great. Thank you. We have a question in the
Mhm.
audience.
Hi, thank you. Great talk. So this is kind of the pathway if I were to move to industry that, for all the reasons that you love, this is the industry job that I could see. But I'm curious about the travel and how much of your year, can you expand on the travel, how much of the year you're really gone and how that kind of works?
That's a great question. And I think it's one that a lot of it will depend on your team size and your company size, and kind of how many conferences you have on your schedule. In my experience, in general, pre-COVID, we were spending somewhere between 75 to 100 nights in a hotel. I would say post-COVID, it's become a lot less because of Zoom. I think that this year, I think I'll end up somewhere around 50 nights in a hotel, 50, 55 nights in a hotel. So, pre-COVID, a lot of times, folks would leave on a Tuesday morning and come back on a Thursday night when they're traveling within their territory, and then have their business meetings, Thursday afternoon, all day Wednesday, and Thursday morning. And then outside of that, so I kind of like to divide the travel into two buckets. The first bucket is traveling within your territory to meet folks at the institution. So for example, I cover Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, so I might be meeting with folks at IU or at Ohio State or over at Cleveland Clinic or something like that. And I would say that's your within territory travel. Outside of that, generally you'll help cover conferences. So attending meetings like the American Thoracic Society or the American Society for Clinical Oncology, kind of whatever the big conferences are for your therapeutic area. You'll be responsible sometimes for manning the medical booth. If you have a medical booth in the expo hall, you might also be responsible for attending talks and going to posters and kind of writing up summaries and reports of the key points from those things. And then Also, setting up meetings with your KOLs, the ones who are attending the conference, and then potentially helping facilitate ad boards or dinners or whatever. And so I would put that in the second bucket of conference travel. And then I guess I lied, there's a third bucket. It would be like internal meetings. A lot of times you'll have a national business meeting, sales meeting. You might go attend a sales meeting with the sales folks and do other like team meetings as well. And those will be sprinkled throughout the year. Generally, there's kind of a busier conference season in the spring, a little bit more of a lull in the summer where you're doing more in-territory travel, and then another busy conference season in the fall. So I think it definitely ebbs and flows, and a lot of times you can structure it the way you want, whatever works for your schedule outside of the conferences. So a lot of people, for example, one of my old coworkers, he would do that Tuesday, Thursday thing, like I said, and a lot of times he would do 3 weeks on the road, and then the fourth week of the month, he would try and stay local, so meeting with institutions within the city where he lives. And that seemed to work really well with him. So I think there's certainly flexibility in it, but it will definitely depend on your team size, how big your territory is, what kind of conference coverage you're assigned, things like that. So hopefully that helps.
Awesome. Thank you. We have one more
You're welcome.
question for the remaining few minutes we have coming from the chat. And this individual asks, do you have any tips to develop this network that you talked about, specifically with students in mind, and in particular international students?
I think it can be really hard. First of all, if your PI or other mentors or faculty at your institution have relationships with industry, I think that's an easy place to start. And then number two, if you have colleagues or fellow grad students or postdocs or trainees who have gone on and gone into the industry, I think that's another great place to start. So I would say those are probably the lowest hanging fruit. And then from there, LinkedIn can be a really powerful tool. I know, when I was pursuing an academic career, I had a LinkedIn, but I never really used it. But LinkedIn is pretty big in the industry. Almost everyone has one. And so I think if you create a profile, and if you have a career services at your institution, a lot of times they can help you put the right things in there and keep things concise and bulleted and whatnot. I would say start there, create a LinkedIn, and then just search for people who have transitioned into the type of roles that you're interested in. And especially bonus if they have a similar background to you. So I would search on LinkedIn for MSLs who came from a PhD background, specifically, kinesiology or pulmonary research. And then I just reach out to them, kind of like almost like a cold call, sending them a note saying, hey, my name's Ren-Jay. I'm currently a postdoc looking to transition. I see, we have a similar background or this or that in common. I would love to hear about your transition. Would you be willing to talk to me? Don't be discouraged when you only get like one response for every 10 or 20 messages you send out, because that's probably what will happen. But I would say be persistent, and don't be afraid to just keep searching, finding new people to reach out to you. And then, once you get in touch with them, you can do what I would call like an informational interview, like, hey, tell me about yourself. Why did you make the transition? What were the most challenging things or unexpected things? Do you have any tips for someone like me? What are your thoughts now that you're doing it? Like, are you enjoying it? Your credit, things like that. Whatever you want to know. But I think those informational interviews can be really helpful. And I probably talked to a dozen MSLs who came from similar backgrounds to me before I successfully made the transition. And I would say it really helped me understand the role better.
Thank you so much. We
No
are
problem.
just about at time. That was excellent. I feel like I have so many more questions I could continue to ask you.
Yeah.
And I do think you mentioned LinkedIn, and it's striking that not a single one of our speakers yesterday for the Academia Day gave a LinkedIn, but every single one of our speakers pretty much today gave a LinkedIn. So I think that's very telling in how big that
actually,
is.
if you go to the next slide, I think my contact information is on there.
Oh, yes.
So anyone, I know we're out of time here. So if you have any follow-up questions, you're welcome to email me anytime or find me on LinkedIn. I forgot to put it on here. I think I might have sent it to Rebecca, but you're welcome to reach out to me anytime. I'm happy to talk to you guys one-on-one or answer questions over email. So thank you so much, Rebecca, for having me, and good luck with the rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.